Hello guys, today I'm going to show you how to make your own home plugin. I'm going to try to cover everything we want to include inside of this plugin, such as saving homes to a file, canceling teleportations whenever a player moves or is damaged, and also adding a teleportation delay. So let's get right into it, shall we? So I think a good place to start is with the set home command. So I'm going to go ahead here and create a new package, and I'm going to name this package commands so we can keep our plugin nice and organized. And inside of this package, I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to name it set home command. And then this class is going to implement command executor, and we're going to go ahead and implement any unimplemented methods, and I'm going to go ahead and change this here to my liking. You can go ahead and change this too, because I consider this to be the standard. And then we're going to go ahead and return true because we want to send our own error messages. And now we can begin with the set home command. We're going to start off by keeping this super simple, but we're going to be adding a couple things to this class in a few minutes here. The first thing we want to do here is check if our sender is an instance of a player. After we know that our sender is for sure a player, we want to go ahead and cast that sender to a player so we can use the player object to get their location. Now that we have the player and the location, we can go ahead and save their home. But we don't want to use the player to save their home, we actually want to use their ID, so I'm going to go ahead and create another variable here for the player's ID. Now we get to the question, how are we actually going to be saving these homes? Now to save them into the server's memory, we're going to be creating a hash map inside of our main class. We will worry about saving the homes to a file shortly. So if I go ahead back over here to my main class, and I'm going to create a private hash map that's going to contain the player's unique ID, as well as the teleport location. And we can name this homes. Inside of our onEnable, we want to make sure to initialize this hash map so we don't get any errors. Now that we have this hash map defined, we can go ahead and create methods for adding and getting players' homes. And I'm also going to be creating a method here to check to see if the player has a home set. These three methods will become handy very shortly. So if we head back over here to our set home command class, we can go ahead and add a couple more things. The first thing we're going to want to do now that we have those methods defined is actually add the player's location and their ID to that hash map we just created. So in order to get access to that hash map, we have to go ahead and create a constructor up here for our set home command, and we're going to pass in an instance of our home plugin, which is also the class that extends Java plugin, which is the important part here. And we're going to be creating a variable here, and if you don't know what these modifiers I'm adding are, just make sure that you know that you need to add them for this case scenario because the plugin is not going to be changing, so we can go ahead and declare it as final. And then we're going to set the plugin's value inside of our constructor here so we can pass it in from our main class. Now that we added that constructor, we can access those methods we made using this plugin variable that we have. And you can see right here it shows up as add home, and we can input the player's ID and their location. And now we have their home added to that list, and we can send them a message telling them that their home has been set. Now let's say a player already had a home set. We want to send them a message letting them know that their previous home has been overridden. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and set our executor for this command inside of the onEnable of our plugin. And this is where we pass in the instance of our plugin from that constructor we made earlier. Now we want to make sure to register this command to the server. So now that we have set the executor for the command so it knows where the code is, we need to actually tell the server that there is a command here. So we can go ahead and here type in commands and add our command here. This command that we're making is going to be called set home, and we can go ahead and add this here, and just like that our command is registered. You don't need to add anything else to register a command. This is all you need, but there are optional modifiers you can put below it. The next thing we want to do is create a class for whenever the player uses the /home command. So I'm going to go ahead here to our command package, and we're going to be creating a new class named home command. And just like the last class, we're going to make this class implement command executor and go ahead and implement those methods. And I'm going to go ahead and do this now. We're going to create a constructor just like we did in that last class. It's going to be identical. We're passing in our plugin, and we're also going to create a variable here. It's going to be a private final home plugin. We're going to define this inside of our constructor. Alright, now that this onCommand method is set up, we can go ahead and write the code for it. So the first thing we're going to do here, just like in the last class, is check to see if our sender is indeed a player. We're going to go ahead and create a player object just like we did in our last class, and we're also going to create a variable that's going to hold their ID. Alright, now that the player is trying to teleport to their home, before we can actually send them there, we have to actually make sure that they have a home set. So we can go ahead and use the method from our main class called hasHome, pass in the user's ID, and if this is false, we want to send them a message saying that they do not have a home set. Now that we have that out of the way, we can go ahead and send the player to their home. To teleport the player to their home, we have to call our player object, and then use the method .teleport, and we can pass in their home location, which we can get from our main class. And also send them a message to let them know that they are teleporting. I will cover how to add a delay and also check to see if the player has moved or been damaged shortly. So right now our code works. This is a functioning plugin, but there is one main problem. The homes are not persistent past server shutdowns. So this means that the player will have to set a new home every single time the server reloads because it's not being saved from the server's memory into a file, which then can be loaded whenever the server starts again. So let's go ahead and set that up right now. So for now, we can go ahead and put this home command class aside. We're not going to be using it, and we can go ahead and define our home command right here inside of our plugin.yml, as well as register it in our onEnable. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get to how we're going to be saving these homes to a file. I'm going to be doing this in a new class for organization's sake that's going to be in the same directory as our main class. So I'm going to go ahead here and name this home files. And inside of this class, we're going to want to create a constructor just as we did in our other classes. It's going to have our main class passed in. Now that we have done that, let's go ahead and create our methods to load and save all of the homes, as well as save individual homes, so that right when the player sets their home, it's saved to a file, and this is good in case the server crashes or stops unexpectedly. So the first thing we want to do is load the file that has the homes in it, and we can do this by creating a file object and then getting our plugins data folder and checking for our home file. In this method, the first string is your directory and the second string is the file's name. Now that we have an object for our file, we want to actually make sure that this file exists. And if this file does exist, we want to load all the homes from the file to our memory. I want to save this file in YAML format so that it is easy for our plugin to read and write data to it. So let me go ahead and create an example file here so I can show you guys what this is going to look like. So our home file is going to look something like this. It's going to have a list of a bunch of different UUIDs, and each UUID is going to have its own unique home. So now that we know what this is going to look like, we can go ahead and plan for that inside of our method. Since we're saving this in YAML configuration, we can use the API to save and serialize locations for us. So this is going to be relatively easy. So the first thing we're going to do is create a variable that's going to be our configuration. Now we can go ahead and check this configuration for any UUIDs, and if we find one, we want to go ahead and load its home. What this method getKeys does, it gets the first path level of keys if you set this to false. If you type this into true, it will get every single key below the path that you are currently on. But we just want the first level path, so we're going to set this to false. Since the UUIDs are going to be the first level path of this file, we want to go ahead and extract all those UUIDs from strings and transfer them into an actual UUID object that Java can use. And we can use this handy method called UUID from string and go ahead and pass in our string right here. So since we know for a fact that every single UUID is going to have a location tied to it, we can go ahead and extract that right away. And the Bukkit API allows us to do this easily by using the method .getLocation and then inputting our path right here. Now that we have all the information we need for our players' homes, we can go ahead and load it into our memory. That's all the code for loading all the homes. This is going to loop through every single home that is inside of this homes.yml file, which is what we wanted. Now we can go ahead and create a method for when the server shuts down. I'm going to go ahead and copy this line of code from here because it's going to be the exact same file we're using. And then just as we did above, we want to make sure that this file exists. But we're going to be checking if the file does not exist first. And if this is the case, we're going to create a new file. And then we're going to hover over this, go to more actions, and surround this with a try catch statement. And then after this, we're going to copy this line of code from up here and put it right down below this if statement. Now that we have loaded the configuration for that file we created, we can go ahead and save all of the homes from memory to that file. So we're going to need to loop through all of the UUIDs inside of our hash map. And I'm actually going to need to create a method to get all the homes because we're going to need to use this. And then we're going to use the method .keyset so we can get a list of all the IDs. We can go ahead and set the ID and get and set the location. And then every single time you edit a file, you also want to save the file. And this also needs to be surrounded by a try catch statement. And we are not done yet. We also want to make a method that is going to save an individual home location. We're going to be copying a lot of code from this above method, so just follow along as I do. And just like that, we saved an individual home to a file. The only thing we had to do is cut out this for loop and put in this one line. You could combine these two methods into one, but then you would be saving the files every single time you added the home, and if you had like 1,000 homes, that would just be inefficient. So I just prefer to have two separate methods, one for saving all of the homes and one for saving individual homes. I'm going to create an instance of that class we just made and put it in here so we can access it as many times as we need. I'm also going to run our initialize method on onEnable and our terminate method on disable. And I'm also going to create one more method here for getting this variable. With that done, we can go ahead and access that variable from this class. So whenever the player sets their home, we want to make sure to add their home to the home file. And just like that, with this one line of code, our home is now saved to a file. Now we're completely done with this command, and we can move on to the next step. So now we want to add a delay to our teleport command, as well as add a way for us to check to see if the player has moved or been damaged. Let's go ahead and start with the easy one here, and that's going to be setting the timer. So let's go ahead to our home command, and adding the timer is relatively simple. We want to make it so this code runs after a few seconds. If you don't know how to delay code or repeat code inside of a Bukkit plugin, it's really simple. The only thing you need to do is create a new Bukkit runnable, and then it'll be underlined in red, but that is okay because you need to add an unimplemented method, which is just this one here named run. And then here's where you can put your code. So I'm going to go ahead and define a variable up here that's going to be our delay, and I'm going to set this to 5 seconds. And then inside of our run method, it's going to be what is run every interval. So we can go ahead here and check if delay is equal to 0. Then we want to teleport the player so we can just move this code right into here. And then we also want to cancel this task from running. Make sure you put the cancel after the code that you want to run, or else it will be canceled before your code has had a chance to run. Then we want to make an else statement for this if statement. Then we can send the player a message letting them know how many seconds is left before they are teleported. And then also inside of this message, you want to add 2 negative signs, and this will increment the value down by 1 after this is run. So it will use the previous value here, But then after this value is displayed, it will then increment it down, so it'll be ready for whenever you use it up here. If you put the negative signs before it, it will increment it before it is used, which means this value will be inaccurate. Now that we have all the code set up for our runnable, we can go ahead down here to the end of it before the semicolon and add the method run task timer, pass in an instance of our plugin, pass in the delay we want this to be at, and then the interval is going to be 20 every 20 ticks, which is every 1 second. And that's all the code done for adding a delay. Now how do we check to see if the player has moved and then cancel this runnable from happening? Well, that is pretty simple. What I'm going to do is go back to our main class, and I am going to create a list of unique IDs, which is going to contain any players that are currently waiting to be teleported. Don't forget to initialize this variable too. And then we're going to create some methods for working with this queue to add players to it, remove players from it, and check if a player is inside of it. Now that we have those methods set, we can go ahead and use them. So whenever the player runs this command, we want to go ahead and add them to the queue. And then before any of this code runs, we want to make sure that the player is still inside of the queue, because we're going to be removing them if they move or get damaged. We can go ahead and cut all this code out, paste it right here. We're going to add an else statement at the bottom, and then if this runs, we're going to send a player a message letting them know that their teleport has been canceled, and we're going to cancel the runnable. We're also going to remove the player from the queue whenever they teleport. And that is all the code done for our home command. Let's go ahead and create 2 listeners now, one for when the player moves and one for when the player gets damaged. I'm going to be doing this inside of a new class, inside of a new package named listeners. And the class is going to be named player listeners. And this class is going to implement listener. And then we're going to create a construct to pass in our main class so we can access those queue methods we made. Now we can go ahead and create our 2 listeners. The first thing we're going to do is listen for the player move event. We want to check to make sure that the block they were just on is equal to the block they are currently on. And we want to get the opposite of this value. So if this is false, that means the player has moved. Go ahead and create a variable to hold our player, as well as a variable to hold our ID. And then we can check to see if the player is queued, and if they are queued, we want to cancel their queue. And then we can go ahead and do the same thing inside of the entity damage event. We want to check to see if the entity inside of the event is an instance of a player. Now we can go ahead and copy this code from up here, change get player to get entity, and cast it to a player. And then after we do that, we want to make sure to register our listener inside of our on enable, or else it will not run at all. A couple of things I overlooked here. Since we are adding the player to the list, and then we're checking to see if the player has a home, this will always be true. So if you want to make sure that the message shows properly, move this code below here, or move this code above here. If you're getting an error in console saying that the specified path does not exist, make sure you go to your on enable, and then check to make sure that the data folder exists. And if it doesn't, create the directory. And that is all of the code done, guys. I will go ahead and show you what this looks like in game right now. So now you can see whenever I type in /set home, it sets our home, it says home set, and if we walk really far away and type in /home, it will say teleporting in 5 seconds, and I forgot to add a space, and if we move really fast, it will say teleportation canceled. And the same thing will happen if we get damaged. And if I go ahead here and set my home again, it will tell me that my previous home was overridden, and now if we teleport to our home again, we will teleport right here instead of at our other home. Just like that, we are at our new home. If this video helped you out, make sure you leave a like, and if you had any issues, maybe come ask for help over on my Discord server. The link is in the description. I just hosted a giveaway over there, so if you weren't over there, you missed out, but we will be doing more in the future, so make sure you join if you are interested in that or any other community events. That's all for today. I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Nice! The mutt's nuts, in fact.